The long hallways of the Galactic Federation Academy buzzed with voices from many different worlds. Students from dozens of alien species walked together, talked together, and learned together. But Kira Lynn walked alone. Her skin was like crystal, clear and beautiful. When light hit it, soft blue patterns appeared on the walls around her. These patterns showed her feelings, whether she wanted them to or not. Right now, they showed fear and sadness. "Look, the glowworm is scared again," said a deep, mean voice behind her. Kira Lynn did not need to turn around and know who it was. Vorthak was huge, even for a Draknari. His people looked like dragons that walked on two legs. Their skin was covered in thick scales that changed color when they laughed or got angry. Vorthak's friends laughed at his joke. The sound was harsh and cruel. Kira Lynn's crystal skin began to glow brighter, without her control. This made more students stop and stare at her. Some pointed. Some whispered to their friends. She held her data pad tighter against her chest and walked faster. 3 long years she had been at this school. 3 years of the same treatment every single day. The other species looked at her people, the Velnathi, like they were weak and strange. They called them refugees from a dead world who did not belong among the stars. The Velnathi homeworld had been dying when the Federation found them. Their sun had been getting hotter and more dangerous. Most of their cities were already gone. The Federation had saved them, but many species thought they should be grateful and quiet. They should not try to be equal to the stronger, older civilizations. Kira Lynn reached the engineering lab and pressed her hand to the scanner. The door opened with a soft hiss. She stepped inside, hoping to find peace in her work. She had been building quantum resonance amplifiers for her final project. The work was difficult but beautiful. When she worked with technology, she felt like herself again. But when she turned on the lights, her heart broke. Her project was destroyed. Months of careful work lay scattered across the floor in tiny pieces. Components that had taken weeks to build were smashed beyond repair. Her research notes were torn and scattered. The delicate crystal matrices that only Velnathi hands could shape were ground into powder under someone's boots. Her bioluminescent patterns flared bright with pain and anger. She could not control them. Tears began to fall down her crystal cheeks. Each tear caught the light, like a small star falling to the ground. Problem here? Kira Lynn looked up quickly. A human stood in the doorway. She had seen him around the academy, but had never spoken to him. Humans were new to this part of space. Most other species thought they were primitive and not very important. He was not as tall as a Draknari or as graceful as the Zephyrians. His skin was brown and smooth, not scaled or crystalline. His hair was black and cut short, but his dark eyes were kind, and they looked at her like she was a real person, not just a curiosity. "It's nothing," she said softly. Her voice came out in musical tones that the universal translator had trouble changing to standard galactic. "Just academy culture." She said the last words with bitterness. Academy culture meant that strong species could do whatever they wanted to weak ones. It meant that if you were different, you deserved whatever happened to you. The human walked into the lab without asking permission. He knelt down on the floor next to the broken pieces of her project. "Looks like someone's idea of a joke to me," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous in it. "You shouldn't," Kira Lynn started to warn him. If other students saw him helping her, they might target him too. Humans were already considered outsiders here, but he was already picking up pieces and sorting them into piles. Broken beyond repair in one pile, damaged but fixable in another, still good in a third pile. His hands moved quickly and carefully, like he understood the technology even though his species had only just learned to travel between stars. "I'm June, by the way," he said without looking up from his work. "And you're going to rebuild this better than before." Kira Lynn stared at him. No one had ever helped her before, not in 3 years. Most students pretended not to see when bad things happened to her. Teachers looked the other way. Even other Velnathi students kept their distance, afraid that helping her would make them targets too. But this human, this June, was helping her without being asked. He was not afraid of what others might think. He was not worried about academy culture or social rules. For the first time in many months, Kira Lynn's crystal skin began to show different patterns. Instead of fear and sadness, soft golden lights appeared. They were small and flickering, like candle flames in the dark. They were the patterns of hope. She knelt down beside June and began to help him sort through the pieces of her broken dreams. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something better from what remained. The next morning, Vorthak was waiting for Kira Lynn outside her dormitory. His massive clawed hand grabbed her shoulder before she could escape. The sharp points of his claws pressed into her crystal skin, creating small cracks that leaked light like tiny wounds. "Stay away from the primitive glowworm," he growled. His breath smelled like sulfur and old meat. "He won't always be around to protect you." Kira Lynn tried to pull away, but Vorthak's grip was too strong. Her skin began to glow brighter with fear, which only made him laugh. The other Draknari students who followed him everywhere started laughing too. Their scales rippled with colors of amusement and cruelty. "Please," she whispered, "I have not done anything wrong." "You exist," Vorthak said simply. "That is wrong enough." He let go of her shoulder and walked away with his friends. Kira Lynn touched the small cuts he had left behind. They would heal, but slowly. Crystal skin took time to repair itself. But Vorthak was wrong about one thing. June seemed to be everywhere. When Kira Lynn went to the library to study, June would appear at a nearby table with his own books. When Vorthak and his gang tried to corner her in the stacks between the shelves, June would walk around the corner, humming quietly to himself. The bullies would see him and decide they had somewhere else to be. In the dining hall, other students would whisper mean jokes when she sat down to eat. They would call her people names and laugh about how her homeworld was dying. But then June would sit at her table with his food tray, and the whispering would stop, not because they were afraid of him, but because somehow his presence made their cruelty seem small and stupid. He never made a big show of helping her. He was not like the heroes in the Federation's entertainment programs who gave speeches and fought dramatic battles. He just existed in the right place at the right time again and again. After 2 weeks of this, Kira Lynn could not stand the curiosity anymore. They were working together in the engineering lab, rebuilding her destroyed project. Her bioluminescent patterns had settled into steady, calm blues for the first time in years. She felt safe enough to ask the question that had been bothering her. "Why do you help me?" she said while connecting 2 crystal matrices together. The work required very steady hands and complete focus. June looked up from the quantum scanner. He was calibrating. The device was making soft beeping sounds as he adjusted its settings. "Where I come from, we have a saying," he said. "The nail that sticks up gets hammered down." Kira Lynn did not understand. Her translator was having trouble with the human idiom. What does that mean? It means that if you are different, if you stand out from everyone else, people will try to hurt you. They will try to make you the same as everyone else or destroy you. June's hands never stopped working while he talked. But humans, we have always been the nails that refuse to get hammered down. "Your species survived because you are stubborn?" Kira Lynn asked. This seemed like a strange reason to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Among other things. June smiled, and she noticed how the expression made his whole face look different. His eyes crinkled at the corners and seemed to glow with warmth. "We survived because we decided that protecting each other is not weakness. It is what makes us strong." Kira Lynn thought about this while they worked. On her homeworld, before the sun started dying, the Velnathi had also protected each other. They shared their light when someone was sad. They worked together on projects too big for one person. But when they came to the Federation Academy, they had learned to hide. They learned to be quiet and not cause trouble. Maybe they had learned the wrong lessons. The next morning, their rebuilt project was gone. Kira Lynn arrived at the engineering lab early, excited to continue their work. But the secure storage locker where they kept their equipment was empty. Months of careful rebuilding had vanished overnight. She ran to the security office, her crystal skin flashing with panic. The security officer, a bored-looking Centauri with too many eyes, barely looked up from his desk. "The recordings from last night malfunctioned," he said in a flat voice. "Nothing we can do." "But the storage locker has 3 different locks and a biometric scanner," Kira Lynn protested. "How could someone just take everything?" The security officer shrugged. Things happen. Maybe you should choose better partners next time. When Kira Lin found June in the hallway and told him what happened, something changed in his face. The warm expression disappeared. His eyes became cold and hard like black stone. His mouth became a thin line. Students walking past him in the hallway noticed the change too. Even passing Draknari, species known for their aggression and fearlessness, crossed to the other side of the corridor when they saw June's expression. Interesting, was all he said, but the way he said it made Kira Lin think that whoever had stolen their project had made a very serious mistake. The whispers started in the dormitory halls and spread like fire through the academy. Students from different species gathered in small groups, talking in low voices about the strange human who did not understand his place. "He thinks he belongs here," said a tall Zephyrian with silver feathers that sparkled in the light. "A primitive from a backward world, acting like he is equal to us. Humans barely learned to fly between stars yesterday," added a Corinth with multiple arms and cold blue skin. "They should be grateful we even let them observe our classes." But the rumors did not stop June. Every morning, he met Kira Lin at the engineering lab. Every afternoon, he sat with her in the library while she studied. When she felt overwhelmed by the advanced mathematics that came naturally to other species, he helped her break the problems into smaller pieces she could understand. Other students stared and pointed, but June acted like he did not notice. He treated Kira Lin like she was important, like her thoughts and ideas mattered. This was something new and strange in the academy, where everyone knew their place in the social order. One afternoon, Vorthak cornered Kira Lin outside the dining hall. His massive form blocked her path, and his yellow eyes glowed with malice. Behind him stood two other Draknari students, their scales rippling with anticipation. "You know he is just using you," Vorthak said, his voice low and threatening. "Humans are manipulators. Parasites. They pretend to be your friend, but they only care about themselves. He will abandon you when it suits him." Kira Lin's crystal skin began to flicker with uncertain patterns. Doubt crept into her mind like poison. What if Vorthak was right? What if June was only being kind because he wanted something from her? But then she remembered last week, when June had spent his own credits to buy replacement materials for their project. The academy store was expensive, and exchange students did not have much money. He could have bought food or entertainment for himself instead. She remembered yesterday, when the food replicators had mysteriously broken down just as she approached them. June had given her half of his meal, without being asked, claiming he was not very hungry, but she had seen him eat the same small portions for 3 days in a row. She remembered the long nights when June had stayed up helping her practice presentations for their classes. Her translator often struggled with technical terms, and her accent made other students laugh. But June had been patient, helping her practice the same words over and over until her confidence grew. "He is my friend," Kira Lin said quietly, but her voice was steady. Vorthak's laugh was like rocks grinding against each other. The sound made other students in the hallway stop and stare. "Your kind does not have friends," he said with cruel amusement. "Only masters and servants. And soon your little pet human will learn which one he is." That night, Kira Lin was working alone in the lower engineering decks. These labs were older and less popular, but they had equipment that was perfect for her crystal-based technology. She had been there for 2 hours when she heard footsteps in the corridor. Too many footsteps. The door opened and 10 figures walked in. 6 Draknari with their scales dark with aggression. 3 Zephyrians with their feathers bristling. 1 Corinth enforcer with all 4 arms flexed and ready for violence. Kira Lin's patterns blazed with terror, casting wild lights across the walls. She backed against a workbench, her heart beating so fast it made her crystal skin pulse like a strobe. Then June walked through the door behind them, his hands raised in surrender. Well, Vorthak said with satisfaction. "Look what we caught sneaking around the lower decks." June looked around the room calmly, taking in the situation. His dark eyes met Kira Lin's for a moment, and she saw no fear there. Only a cold, calculating intelligence. "Let me guess," June said in a conversational tone, like he was discussing the weather. "This is where you teach us our place in the food chain?" Smart for a primitive, Vorthak growled, flexing his claws. June nodded thoughtfully, like Vorthak had said something interesting. See, that is where you made your mistake, he said. On Earth, we learned a long time ago that there's no food chain. There are just choices, and you have been making bad ones. The beating was swift and brutal. 10 against 1 was not a fair fight, by any measure. June fought back as best he could, but he was smaller and outnumbered. They knocked him down and kicked him while he was on the ground. They hit him with fists and claws, and whatever they could find. But through it all, June never backed down. He never apologized. He never begged them to stop. Every time they knocked him down, he got back up. Every time they demanded he admit he was inferior, he looked them in the eye and stayed silent. When it was finally over, they left him bleeding on the laboratory floor and walked out laughing among themselves. Kirillin rushed to his side, her patterns flashing with panic and grief. June's face was swollen and cut. Blood ran from his nose and mouth. One of his eyes was already turning purple. But when he looked up at her, his eyes still burned with an inner fire that nothing could extinguish. "Still think I'm just using you?" he asked through split lips. Kirillin felt something change inside her crystal heart. Her patterns shifted to colors she had never made before. Fierce purples and golds that spoke of loyalty deeper than blood, of friendship stronger than fear. The Grand Assembly Hall was the most impressive room in the entire academy. Its crystal dome stretched high above, showing the stars beyond. Hundreds of seats filled the circular space, and today they were packed with the most important beings in this part of the galaxy. Federation admirals sat in the front rows, their uniforms covered with medals and honors. Diplomatic representatives from dozens of worlds watched from special boxes. These were the people who decided which students would go to the elite academies, who would join the military special divisions, and who would be given the resources to change the galaxy. Kirillin stood next to their project display, her crystal skin cycling through nervous green patterns. Her hand shook slightly as she checked their equipment one more time. Around the Great Hall, other students showed off their final projects. There were powerful weapons that could destroy asteroids, faster-than-light communication systems that could talk across the galaxy instantly, beautiful starships that looked like works of art. Most of these projects came from the advanced species, the Zephyrians with their perfect understanding of energy flow, the Corinth with their mathematical genius, the Draknari with their talent for making things stronger and more durable. These were things that would have been impossible for her people to build alone, but their project was different. It was a quantum shield matrix, designed to protect planets from the kind of stellar radiation that had destroyed her homeworld. It combined Velnathi crystal technology with human engineering ideas. Neither species could have built it alone, but together they had made something new. Presenting the quantum shield matrix, June announced to the assembled crowd. His voice was calm and confident, not showing any of the nervousness that Kirillin felt. Designed to protect vulnerable worlds from stellar radiation and enemy bombardment. The demonstration began perfectly. Kirillin activated the crystal matrices, while June controlled the power systems. Their shields appeared in the air above their display, shimmering barriers of pure energy. The test computers began throwing simulated dangers at the shields. Solar flares that could burn away a planet's atmosphere were absorbed and redirected harmlessly. Plasma bursts from enemy weapons were turned aside like raindrops off glass. Energy beams that could melt mountains were caught and converted into power for the shield system itself. The Federation officers in the front row nodded with approval. Admiral Thexera, a distinguished Centauri with wise old eyes, made notes on her data pad. General Corven, the massive Draknari who commanded the sector fleet, leaned forward with interest. Elegant Velnathi engineering, one officer whispered to another. Enhanced by human adaptability, his companion replied. Kirillin's patterns began to shift from nervous green to hopeful gold. Maybe they really had built something special. Maybe the months of work, the stolen projects, the harassment and beatings had all been worth it. Then everything went wrong. Power fluctuations began to cascade through their system like a virus. Warning lights started flashing red across their control panels. The beautiful, stable shield matrix began to wobble and spark. Kirillin felt her heart sink as she recognized what was happening. Sabotage. Someone had planted a computer virus in their system. Time to activate during the most important moment of their presentation. The quantum matrix is destabilizing, she said, her voice tight with panic. Her crystal skin blazed with bright, chaotic patterns of fear and despair. Around the hall, other students were starting to whisper and point. Some were barely hiding their smiles. The shields flickered and began to collapse. Months of careful work were falling apart in front of the most important audience they would ever have. All their dreams of helping her people, of proving that the Velnathi deserved respect, were crumbling. "It is over," Kira Lynn whispered, tears starting to fall down her crystal cheeks. "No," June said quietly, his hands already moving across the backup control panels. "It is just beginning." His fingers flew across keyboards and switches that Kira Lynn had not even known existed. He was rerouting power through backup systems that were not supposed to be there. As he worked, she realized what he had done. All those times their project had been stolen or destroyed, all those nights they had spent rebuilding, June had been learning from each attack. He had built secret backup systems using parts they had salvaged from previous sabotage attempts. He had created redundancies and safeguards that no one else knew about. Every time their enemies had knocked them down, June had gotten back up and built something stronger. The shield reformed in the air above them. But it was different now. It was not just the elegant crystal matrix they had started with. It incorporated dozens of adaptive protocols, backup power systems, and automatic repair functions that had never been there before. The test systems threw everything they had at the new shields. Solar radiation, plasma weapons, kinetic bombardment, electromagnetic pulses. Nothing could break through. The shields did not just hold. They got stronger with each attack, learning and adapting in real time. The assembly hall fell completely silent. Even the whispering stopped. "How?" Admiral Fexera demanded, standing up from her seat. "This exceeds all theoretical maximums. The power efficiency alone should be impossible." June looked up at her with blood still on his face from the beating he had received. His eye was still swollen and his lip was split, but his voice was steady and proud. "Human engineering principle," he replied simply. "We build everything expecting it to break, and we make sure it keeps working anyway." The disciplinary hearing room was cold and formal, with high walls made of polished metal that reflected everyone's faces back at them in distorted shapes. 3 long tables formed a triangle, with judges from different species sitting behind each one. In the center sat a single chair where the accused was supposed to sit. June sat in that chair for 3 days while beings from across the galaxy argued about what should happen to him. His face still showed the bruises from the beating Vorthak had given him. One eye remained slightly swollen, and there was a cut on his lip that had not yet healed completely. "The human violated numerous cultural protocols," declared Counselor Vexton, a tall Zephyrian whose silver feathers rustled when he spoke. "He interfered with established social order. He endangered Academy stability by encouraging inappropriate relationships between species." The counselor spoke as if June was not even in the room. His voice was cold and disapproving, like a teacher scolding a child who had misbehaved. He protected a student. Admiral Fexera countered from the opposite table. Her many Centauri eyes focused on the Zephyrian with obvious disagreement. He prevented systematic abuse. He enhanced interspecies cooperation in ways we have not seen in generations. "Academy traditions exist for good reasons," added General Corven, the massive Draknari whose scales were dark with serious thought. "The natural hierarchy maintains order. When lesser species know their place, there is peace. Peace built on fear is not real peace," Admiral Fexera replied sharply. "It is just delayed violence." The arguments went on for hours each day. Representatives from different worlds spoke about natural law and social order. They talked about how things had always been done, how some species were naturally stronger or smarter or more advanced than others. But while they argued in the hearing room, something else was happening in the academy halls. Students who had been silent for years were finally speaking up. A young Corinth named Zektar stood up to bullies who had been taking his lunch credits for months. 3 Velnathi students formed a study group instead of hiding in their rooms. Even some of the smaller Draknari began questioning why they had to follow the biggest and meanest of their kind. In the dining hall, Something unprecedented happened. Students from different species began sitting together. Not just the powerful ones, but mixed groups that would have been unthinkable before. A Zephyrian engineer shared tables with Velnathi crystal workers. Coran mathematicians explained problems to struggling Draknari students. The teachers and administrators watched these changes with confusion and worry. This was not how the academy had worked for hundreds of years. The social order that kept everyone in their proper place was breaking down. On the third day of the hearing, Kira Lin was called to testify. She walked into the formal chamber with her head held high, her crystal skin glowing with steady, confident patterns instead of the fearful flickering she had shown for so long. "State your experience with the accused," Counselor Vexton commanded. Kira Lin looked around the room at all the important beings who would decide June's fate. Then she looked at June himself, sitting quietly in his chair, and her patterns shifted to warm, grateful colors. "3 years ago, I came here believing I deserved the treatment I received," she said clearly. "I thought my people were weak, unworthy, destined to fade away like our dying sun. I accepted cruelty because I thought it was natural law." She paused, letting her words sink in. "One human showed me that strength is not about who you can hurt. It is about who you choose to protect. He did not save me because I was useful to him. He did not help me because his species needed allies. He protected me because he believed it was the right thing to do." The room fell silent. Even Counselor Vexton stopped shuffling his papers. "That is not natural law," Kira Lin continued. "That is something better. That is choice." The verdict came down the next morning. June received a formal censure on his record, but was allowed to remain at the academy. Vorhak and his gang faced suspension and mandatory psychological evaluation. Several administrators were quietly transferred to other positions. But the real victory was smaller and quieter than any official punishment. Students walked through the halls with their heads up instead of looking at the floor. Mixed species groups worked together on projects that combined different kinds of knowledge and skill. The barriers that stood for centuries were dissolving one friendship at a time. On the last day of the term, June and Kira Lin worked side by side in their favorite lab. They were designing new shield technologies that could protect her homeworld from the stellar radiation that had nearly destroyed her people. The work was complex and beautiful, requiring both human adaptability and Velnathi precision. "Will you visit Earth?" June asked as they calibrated the final parameters of their shield system. Kira Lin's patterns shifted to warm gold, the colors of friendship and hope and new beginnings. "Will you visit New Velnath when we rebuild it?" "Would not miss it," June replied with a smile that reached his eyes. Outside the lab windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, unchanged for millions of years. But inside the lab, 2 young engineers were building something new. They were creating a future where strength served protection, where being different meant new opportunities, and where the weak were never abandoned to face the darkness alone. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had always known, that the strongest societies were not built on fear, but on the simple belief that everyone deserved a chance to shine.